We begin from the island nation of Sri Lanka, where President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled the country just hours before his expected resignation over a deep economic crisis, including a hike in fuel price, which the people insist is unacceptable. President Gotabaya named the country's Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as acting president, who immediately declared a state of emergency. But the angry protesters stormed his office hours after he was named acting president, demanding his resignation. We have more details in this report.
In recent weeks, thousands have taken to the streets in anger, blaming the 73-year-old fleeing President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his family for Sri Lanka's deep economic crisis. President Rajapaksa left for the Maldives hours before he was expected to resign, amid widespread protest over his handling of a devastating crisis. Speaker of the Sri Lanka Parliament says the country's Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has been appointed acting president by fleeing President Rajapaksa. The acting president has declared a state of emergency across the island nation. Meanwhile, protesters have stormed the office of Sri Lanka's Prime Minister, with police using tear gas on the crowd and failing to stop them. In recent days, protesters have occupied several government buildings, demanding that top leaders step down in their anger over a 3-month economic crisis. Tuesday and Wednesday, the protesters flocked to the presidential palace, swimming in the pool, marveling at paintings and lounging on beds piled high with pillows. Groups scaled over the wall and entered the office as the crowd roared in support, cheering them on and waving the Sri Lanka flag. The Air Force has confirmed that fleeing President Rajapaksa, his wife, and 2 security guards boarded a military aircraft in the early hours of Wednesday morning after he invoked executive powers to enable his escape. An army helicopter has been flying close to outside the presidential secretariat.
And for more on this leadership crisis, global affairs analyst Sam Fati joins me virtually from Washington, D.C. Good to have you join us, Sam Fati.
My pleasure.
You and I had a conversation on the Sri Lanka crisis just barely a few days ago. And now we understand that the president has fled the country and then the prime minister is in charge, but there has not been an official resignation from the president. And then the Speaker of the Parliament says that the president has not named anyone as acting president. Speak to the legality of this in terms of the prime minister now becoming the acting president and declaring a state of emergency.
Well, in any country, the prime minister, whether it has resigned or not, in the absence of the should act as the president. However, of course, we are seeing the political divide, showing or rearing up its head here. And with the Speaker of the Parliament saying nothing has been done officially yet. This could be true, but, they need to avoid what I would call a political scramble for power. I think that may be a policy when we speak about politicians here, and everybody's trying to seize the opportunity to be where they want to be or to ultimately become the president. So when we spoke a few days ago, I have warned that there may be, rival factions coming together and coalitions that really hold. So while the president has left, does not mean that Sri Lanka is going to be set on a different path. But the fact that the prime minister and the Speaker of the Parliament are now at odds is an indication of that very difficulty that this country is about to face. And they cannot address the economic issue that they have at hand if there is no proper leadership, if there's no cooperation and political will between the politicians to resolve this issue. This should not be taken. It's a moment of crisis in a very impoverished nation. So they should put the country first and ensure that they put their political differences aside just for now and work towards resolving the economic crisis that their people are facing.
But doesn't that also mean that at the moment that there is a power vacuum in Sri Lanka? Because according to the parliament in that country, they say the constitution, there's a provision in the constitution that says that the president must officially resign before the prime minister can become the acting president. If the president has fled the country and the prime minister and has not resigned, doesn't that mean that there is a power vacuum? And especially again when it is clear that people are asking the prime minister to also resign.
There is the president generally just leaving abruptly. Yes, does leave a power vacuum, but more so there is also a struggle to fill that vacuum, which is even more detrimental. The nature in which the president left and fled to an entire different country, makes it even more risky and then puts the country at even a more difficult state. And so it leaves the nation leaderless. And so it gives the opportunity for a struggle for power. And that's what Sri Lanka is facing right now. Now, here is what needs to be done. Okay. The Constitution also puts an ascension, like there's an order in which people should ascend. Not necessarily that the president has to resign, but in the absence of the president, who is in control? Okay, if you go to, let's say, Commonwealth countries, you have the president, you have the vice president, you have the speaker of the parliament, let's say in that order. There is also an order in Sri Lanka, and everybody must respect that order. Now, obviously, the next question that anybody, especially if you work in the security field, would ask is, who are the military and security forces going to back, especially the military? Now, the prime minister have declared a state of emergency and has imposed a curfew. What was his relationship with the military? Are they going to enforce these orders? If they are going to enforce his orders and they are going to be on his side, then it should be known to everybody that the prime minister would be the president. And if anybody dares to go against him, the military would crush you. And this is where it's coming to. And like he said, the military should do whatever they can to impose the state of emergency and to impose the curfew. The only thing we don't know at the moment is will his orders be carried out.
Prime Minister Wickremesinghe wants to be president. He's always nursed the ambition to become president. Now that he's acting president, what implication will this have for the move by opposition political parties to form an interim unity government?
Well, look, the opposition parties at this point in time would obviously let it be known that they are going to meet, they are going to talk. But there is no indication that they would actually be able to come together and fully constitute a proper coalition that would be able to crush the prime minister completely out of this leadership struggle, right? So, and I think it's going to be very difficult to kick the prime minister out of it. I think he has a hold on the situation, and I think he's going to end up being the acting president officially, that everybody would have to agree to. Not in terms of the president saying we want him to go, but it seems like he is not ready to budge, and he's not ready to do what the president did and leave, or just simply to resign or to step away, right? So, and he's releasing the security forces. So it brings about some kind of fear that says if he succeeds, we see a Sri Lanka that would be under authoritarian rule, with the military having control of the government. All these are dynamics, right? So it's like, one may say, well, maybe we are going too far. But that's the thing about politics, about governance, about security. You have to look into the future and try to see the path that the country is going. And usually, if a country is in economic crisis, we have seen it across Africa. The best time that coup d'etats happen is when a country's economy is taking a nosedive, right? So what is going to happen next? Will the military intervene if a leadership or power vacuum continue to happen? Now, if that of course means the constitution is suspended, you may see the arrest of many politicians, many senior government officials, and generally this kind of coup is always supported by the people because that's what they want. So they're going to get arrested. There's going to be a state of emergency. The constitution is suspended, but people feel like there should be consequences for it. Now, would the prime minister act on that and maybe start arresting for other government officials or some of his colleagues as a way to say, look, those responsible, we are going to get them dealt with, and then we're going to set a new path for the country, and we're going to put all the strict rules to prevent corruption from occurring. Maybe that is the way he's going to get support. And politics is a game of chess. He might just make a move like that. So the point is, Sri Lanka is on this path. Right now, they must come to terms. The people, the governors and the government, have to come to terms as to what path they want to take. Now, this protest doesn't have a particular leadership. There's no leadership in it. But I think it's better for them to get more organized and say who do they want to lead this country if they don't want the prime minister, the president, or any other person really who was in the established political camps to rule the country. They have to come up with a choice.
And let's talk about that, because right now it is not clear the path that the country might take in terms of who becomes the president, or if the unity government will work. But just in case that unity government, the opposition political parties are able to put together that unity government in the midst of this crisis, what sort of challenges are ahead of that unity government? What challenges are they likely to face?
Well, one of the biggest challenges they're likely to face is to control inflation and put in place strict fiscal policies in terms of government spending, cutting down their spending. This includes borrowing and how they are going to service their international debt, and how they are going to ensure that corruption comes to an end. But they also would have to place a transitional justice program, and how do they prosecute and what evidence do they have against people that were participating in the endemic corruption of the country. Now, this is going to be difficult to implement if the very people that end up leading the country were a part of the establishment. So it's going to turn, and if that occurs, it's going to turn from just reforms to what is going to be described as a political witch hunt, and we will see a lot of human rights violations in the process.
We'll continue to monitor developments in that country. Thank you so much for talking to us, as always. Global Affairs Analyst Sam Fati.
My pleasure.